Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's really great to see you all here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Caitlin Byrne. I'm the director of the Griffith Asia Institute, and together with my colleagues from the Queensland Art Gallery, Gallery of Modern Art, it is really a delight to welcome you here to this evening's in-person Perspectives Asia seminar. And I think not only is it great for us to be together in 3D and to connect and talk with each other, you'll notice we're in this very lovely cinema and we are appropriately physically distanced at the same time. So feel free to spread out and enjoy tonight's discussion. But to begin, and in the spirit of reconciliation, let me first acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting tonight, the Turrbal and Jagera peoples, and recognising their wisdom, creativity and deep connection to country, I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all First Nations peoples, including those who might be with us tonight. Can I also acknowledge a couple of other people in the audience tonight? Firstly, Dr. Peter Binks, who has joined us this evening, and Peter has recently joined Griffith University as the Vice President, Industry and External Engagement. It's a hugely demanding role, Peter. I know you've had a busy day. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Tarun Nagesh, no stranger to many of you here tonight, given his extensive association over the last decade with the gallery. But if I can just acknowledge, Tarun, your recent appointment as curatorial manager for Asian and Pacific art here at the gallery. Tarun brings enormous depth of experience and insight and generosity of spirit and ideas to this role. Tarun, it's such a pleasure to work with you, and we're really delighted on your appointment. Congratulations. And we look forward to continuing to work with you. So tonight is our first Perspectives Asia seminar for 2021. It's our first in-person seminar for about 18 months. So it really is nice to be back in person. And in bringing these seminars to you, we work particularly closely with our colleagues at the Gallery's Centre for Asia Pacific Art. It is a genuine partnership. We're now into our 17th year, and we're really grateful to have the opportunity to work with such fabulous colleagues. Our aim is to design conversations that allow us together to explore issues of contemporary culture, politics and society in our region, the Asia Pacific region. I think we've felt really privileged to work together and to co-host such a diverse range of speakers over the years, looking at key developments in our region and also thinking about Australia's relationship with its Asian and Pacific neighbours. Importantly, through this series, we really hope to give voice to the perspectives, the many and varied perspectives of our region, and to generate conversations that build understanding and empathy, and conversations that also empower. So I hope that tonight, and I'm actually sure tonight will be no exception. Although I would suggest we've got a little bit of a shift in focus. Tonight we will be looking at and hopefully challenging ourselves to think differently about how we can navigate our Asia-Pacific future. And it's no secret that Australia really faces a critical juncture in the way that it navigates the current direction or its future direction and engagement with Asia-Pacific neighbours. While it is increasingly clear that Asian economies will be central to global economic recovery, particularly in this post-COVID era, Australia's ability to support that recovery, to understand the challenges that it presents, to engage in recovery and growth opportunities that are presented, and they will be presented in different ways. Our ability to do that is no longer assured, and our success in doing it will be underpinned by our capability to engage effectively. And effective engagement really demands a kind of different capability, a new emphasis on Asia-related skills and expertise, on intercultural competencies, familiarity with our region, and an ability to navigate the complex sets of relationships and dynamics within our very difficult and at times fractious world. Our speaker tonight, Jieh-Yung has long argued that one way to increase the chance of success in Asia involves better use of Australia's diaspora communities, those diaspora communities who are living here in Australia, Asian Australians and the Asian diaspora in Australia. It's an argument that suggests the richness of Australia is not just in our minerals and our resources, our goods and services. It actually rests in the diversity and the capabilities of our people. So this is an important topic for Australia. It's an important topic for us right now. And there is, I think, no one better than Jieh-Yung Lo to guide us through the discussion tonight. So Jieh-Yung Lo is the founding director of the Centre for Asian Australian Leadership at the Australian National University. He brings a rich background working in policy, advocacy, and leadership in community, with business and in academia, and also in politics, having spent some time as a councillor with the City of Monash and 2 years as Deputy Mayor. Jieh-Yung Lo, the floor is yours.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me okay? Thank you all for attending. It is great to be able to speak to you all today in person rather than through a laptop or through some sort of online Zoom device. So it's great to be able to just be here in person and connect with you all and learn from each and every one of you on why this topic is of interest to you. We meet, as always, on sacred ground, the land of the Turrumbal and Yurraga nations. I acknowledge their country and offer my deep respect to elders past, present and emerging. I would like to take this opportunity to offer my sincere thanks to Professor Caitlin Byrne, Director of the Griffith Asia Institute, for the invitation and the opportunity to speak today, and for which I've been told the first Perspectives Asia in-person seminar in 18 months. So not a lot of pressure, but still there is there. But I look forward to hopefully wowing you all and provide a compelling case for the topic that we're about to speak to today. A special thanks to my close friend and fellow co-instigator of Asian Australian Representation and Leadership, Mr. Song Lee of PwC, in his capacity as a member of the Griffith Asia Institute's Advisory Council, for the referral and recommendation to be here today. A big thank you also to the GAI team, Megan and Natasha, for their flawless organisation and hospitality in getting this proud Melburnian up to Brisbane. My first visit to this great city since 1998, so it's been a while, but I'm really glad to be here. And it is also worth noting that Griffith University, I'm sure this has been mentioned many times, but it's definitely worthy of another mention, was the first Australian university to offer an Asian Studies degree all the way back in 1975. GAI is the embodiment of Griffith's long-term and enduring commitment to the study and engagement of nations in Asia and the Pacific. I, for one, am very proud to have Asian Studies as one of my majors as part of my Bachelor of Arts degree undertaken at the University of Melbourne, and conferred to me by the then Vice-Chancellor of University of Melbourne, Professor Glenn Davis, who was, as you all know, Griffith's third Vice-Chancellor, who I am now proud and honoured to have as my colleague at the ANU. Special thanks also to Ruth and Tarun of the Queensland Art Gallery and Gallery of Modern Art for hosting us here this evening, especially made more special due to the dazzling and fitting venue, especially during the William Yang Seeing and Being Seen exhibition, best described by my friend and proud Queenslander Benjamin Law, and I quote, "William Yang's work makes me feel seen and reminds me that I exist. This is a similar feeling that I personally experience every time I come across the pioneering work and contribution of many Asian Australians across our great country." So thank you again for the honour and privilege of being invited to deliver this first Perspectives Asia seminar and lecture of 2021. As I mentioned before, I do hope I will be able to live up to your expectations, stimulate further thoughts, reflections and conversations. Asia is key to Australia's prosperity, with 7 of the top 10 trading partners being in Asia. The acceleration and diversification of trade with Asia is the cornerstone to Australia's post-COVID-19 economic recovery. However, Increasing geopolitical tensions, strategic and economic competition for access to Asia, its markets and consumers, means we in Australia will have to play to our strengths and tap into our competitive advantage if we are going to stand out. A strength and competitive advantage we have in our Asian Australian and Asian diaspora here in Australia. Not only are we blessed with a geographical advantage over our competitors, we have a diverse and Asia-capable workforce in Asian Australians and the Asian diaspora that are ready and able to help Australia succeed in Asia, assist to safeguard our economic prosperity, and consolidate our place in the region. The title of my lecture this evening is Asian Australians, Enabling and Elevating Australia's Competitive Advantage to Succeed in Asia. Through my professional and personal experiences, I want to take this opportunity to reflect on how we can better embrace our unique values as a proud, diverse, cohesive and successful multicultural nation, and the need to build on our unique cultural capabilities through Asian Australians and the Asian diaspora to better navigate, engage and connect diplomatically, economically and socially with our neighbours and friends in the Asian region. From my perspective, this can be achieved through a number of ways. Number one, increase and prioritise Asian Australian representation in senior leadership positions across Australia's public institutions and private sector corporations, something we at the ANU Centre for Asian Australian Leadership, or CAL to be short, we're all about acronyms, so has been set up to do. Recognise the unique advantages Asian Australians bring to strengthen Australia's Asian skills and capabilities, and create pathways for our businesses and governments to better enable and elevate Asian Australians to deliver on their full potential to support our nation's aspirations in the region. I had the opportunity to raise these matters through the Asia Taskforce last year, an initiative by the Business Council of Australia, Asia Society Australia, with PwC and the University of Sydney Business School to develop practical solutions for Asia-Australia business engagement. Both Caitlin and I were involved in drafting separate discussion papers, and this is where we intertwined and connected. What brought us together was our shared belief in the need to reimagine Australia's Asia engagement capabilities, a challenge that can be met by the tremendous and rich ethnic and cultural diversity at home through our Asian Australian and Asian diaspora. Back in 2015, seems a very long time ago, I wrote an article for Asia Society Australia calling for the need to re-engage with Australia's Asian connection. When it comes to establishing and developing Australia's Asia-relevant capabilities, I argued back then, and I still do today, Australia needed to start utilising the experiences and cultural knowledge of Asian Australians and embrace our own migration success story. I do credit the Asia Society Australia for giving me the opportunity to publish this piece because I felt I was very much the lone voice in the wilderness back then. The potential of Asian Australians in driving and leading Australia's success in the Asian century hardly got a look in by public policymakers and business leaders. An example of this is the former Gillard government's much anticipated Asian Century White Paper back in 2012. While the paper included projections, statistics and outlooks of Asia's future growth, opportunities for Australia's economy and how we build deeper and more meaningful relationships, there was a very obvious omission. What it failed to mention is Australia's ethnically and culturally diverse makeup and our connection with Asia through our successful migration history and multicultural society. However, in saying that, there has been progress. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, an India Economic Strategy to 2035, and the 2017 Foreign Policy White Paper mentioned the potential and role of the diaspora and multicultural communities, but it didn't feature as a leading policy recommendation or a call to action until the Asia Taskforce last year. Championing, and I quote, championing the talent of our Asian Australian and diaspora communities became one of the 5 main policy recommendations featured in the Taskforce's final report. And with the work of our centre, the Centre for Asian Australian Leadership at the ANU, leading through a series of research, outreach and training initiatives, this issue of greater Asian Australian representation and cultural diversity leadership has started to be elevated at the national level. We have come a long way, but still have a long way ahead to achieving our full potential. The point I made back then, and something I've continued to make on a regular basis, is when it comes to better understanding Asia and strengthening our own Asia capabilities, Australia does not have to start from scratch. Australia has an active and entrepreneurial Asian Australian and Asian diaspora community that possesses deep knowledge of Asian business cultures and extensive connections with the region. Individuals with knowledge of another culture and language have the ability to engage businesses to better understand and service the needs of our increasingly diverse local and global clients and opening up new networks in international markets. Something I myself have experienced during my role in facilitating a sister/friendship city agreement on behalf of the city of Hobart between the ancient Chinese capital of Xi'an and Hobart back in 2014 and 2015. The 2019 Australia's International Business Survey found a significant share, between 28 to 40%, of firms making their highest revenues in ASEAN, Hong Kong, China, Japan, and India, all reported that multicultural communities are essential or very important to international market development. These results suggest that Asian Australians and the Asian diaspora, with their established international networks and connections, direct channels, and language and cultural skills, do and can assist Australian firms through active trade, intermediation, and support of international market development for Australian goods and services. The presence of Asian Australians and the Asian diaspora gives Australian businesses and our governments access to a large pool of talent available and are able to skillfully navigate the challenges and opportunities of doing business and exercising diplomacy in Asia. As an Australian of Chinese heritage, ABC, Australian-born Chinese and Chinese Australian, I have always felt I possessed superpowers. Superpowers that include walking between two worlds, speaking 3 languages, and shifting between 2 mindsets at my will. Superpowers that came in handy during my Xi'an Hobart experience, which I'll go into a bit more detail later on. The downside? Some perceive me as being too Chinese for Australia and too Australian for China, which at times led to questions such as where someone like me truly call home. To those members in the audience that possess dual or multiple ethnic and cultural identities, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is a question you may have asked yourself during your upbringing and experiences. But despite these internal conflicts and challenges, it is also an opportunity we need to grasp and skill sets we need to utilise on behalf of Australia. As Caitlin mentioned before in her introduction, in her very kind introduction, the richness of Australia is not just in our minerals and resources, but the diversity of our people. According to the 2016 census, 28% of those counted were born overseas, and another 20% have at least one overseas-born parent, with an ever-increasing proportion of migrants coming from Asia, more now, in fact, than from Europe. Australia has more overseas-born than Canada, which is at 22%, and doubled the percentage in the United States. Of languages other than English spoken in Australia, 5 out of the top 10 are Asian: Chinese Mandarin, Chinese Cantonese, Vietnamese, Tagalong, and Hindi. I'm very grateful to having the ability to speak 2 out of the 5. In addition to our geographic advantage, we also possess a diversity advantage over our closest competitors. Although it is not easy to extract precise data on the ethnic and cultural composition of Australia's whole population on the basis of the census data, which is collected by the ABS on place of birth, languages spoken at home, and self-identified ancestry, the best current estimates in recent reports from both the Australian Human Rights Commission and from PwC and AsiaLink in 2018 and 2017 respectively, that Asian Australians now constitute 12% of the Australian population. Recent research conducted by us at the ANU estimated that some 14.7% of Australian adults identify as Asian Australian, and of those who did identify as Asian Australian, 30.5% were born in Australia. To understand how far we have come and the diversity that lies within our society, my local federal MP, Tim Watts, summed up in his book, The Golden Country, Australia's Changing Identity, Asian Australians, approximately 14%, are already a larger minority group in Australia than are African Australians in the United States, which stands at 13%. Despite our size, we are not represented in top management roles and across the boardrooms in Australia's public institutions like our parliaments and our town halls, and private sector corporations in the boardrooms, or at universities and in the media. The Australian Human Rights Commission report, Leading for Change, a blueprint for cultural diversity and inclusive leadership, found that the ethnic and cultural default leadership remains Anglo-Celtic, and that Australian society may not be making the most of its ethnically and culturally diverse backgrounds and talents. Examining first the cultural backgrounds of CEOs of ASX companies, ASX 200 companies, federal government ministers, heads of federal and state government departments, and vice-chancellors of universities, the Commission found that just 1.6% of them were Asian Australian. When the analysis was broadened out to cover leadership positions one level below this, group executives of ASX companies, elected members of the Commonwealth Parliament, deputy heads of government departments and deputy vice-chancellors, it showed the proportion of Asian Australians to be still only at 3.3%. While Asia-minded leaders in business, academia and government constantly agonise about the insufficiency of Asian language teaching and Asia-related learning in our schools and universities, some of them often do so without recognising, and as I mentioned earlier, an obvious admission in the 2012 Asia Century White Paper, that Australia already has a significant pool of native Asian language speakers. Take the Chinese Australian community for an example. There are more than 900,000 fluent speakers in Chinese dialects alone, and 1 million more speaking other Asian languages. While non-Asian Australian executives can undoubtedly develop knowledge and expertise in Asian markets, languages and culture, Asian Australians, shaped by their family ties, ethnicity, cultural heritage, bring with them a set of unique and personal attributes to the Asian Australian experience. This deeply embedded perspective can prove to be the edge in navigating the nuances of assessing opportunities and risks with bottom line implications, an aspect that is not properly measured, noticed, and valued, especially in senior leadership positions. To develop, sustain, and take business and working relationships in Asia to a new level, finding commonality through shared interests and cultural values is important, as it makes the relationship to be more genuine and less transactional. Superpowers we Asian Australians have at our disposal to help Australia succeed. I was fortunate to be given the opportunity to utilise my own superpowers during my facilitation of the Hobart and Xi'an friendship/sister city relationship. As you can tell, we couldn't sort of come up with a conclusion of whether it's a friendship or a sibling relationship back in 2014 and 2015. Despite having no connections with each other or no knowledge of each other, I was able to leverage my language and cultural skills and knowledge of Chinese history, politics and traditions to establish trust with our Chinese counterparts and confidence with senior representatives of the City of Hobart. I even mentioned to our Chinese counterparts that my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was involved in the encirclement campaigns during the Republican era, where the Nationalist Army, which he was a part of, encircled communists in the early 1930s. Interestingly, when I thought about raising that, I wasn't sure how our Chinese counterparts would react to that, but interestingly, they found it fascinating because it was a piece of history that they weren't aware of. But it instantly drew a connection between us. I advised Hobart to consider Xi'an for many reasons. One, it was one of China's emerging megacities and a focal point of China's opening and development of Western China. It is one of China's oldest cities and one of China's 4 great ancient capitals, as it served as the capital of the Zhou, Qin, Han, Sui, and Tang dynasties. Chinese President Xi Jinping's family origin is from Shanxi province, of which Xi'an is the provisional capital, not to mention his familiarity with Tasmania during his time as governor of Fujian province, of which Tasmania has a sister state relationship with. The very presence of Xi'an and their interest in setting up a relationship with Hobart nearly caused a diplomatic row, as Fujian's provisional capital, Fuzhou, was working towards establishing a sister city relationship with Hobart. By tapping into my own superpowers and nuance, I was able to find a way forward for all 3 cities and local governments. The engagement between Xi'an and Hobart played a pivotal role in President Xi's decision to visit Hobart after the 2014 G20 summit in Brisbane, where his visit and presence generated immense exposure for Tasmanian products and the state itself as a holiday and study destination. By all means, just to put all this in perspective, President Xi was only in Hobart for 45 minutes, not a very long visit, and his personal plane was too big to land on the on the Hobart Tarmac Airport. So they had to spend some time enlarging that to make it to make it comfortable for the plane to land. But it was a great coup for the city of Hobart and the state of Tasmania. Although, can't fully claim credit with that relationship, but it did play a significant role in President Xi's decision to visit Hobart, and only Hobart, the only Australian city that he visited beyond Brisbane after the G20 summit. My experience is just one of many where Asian Australians can deploy their skills and capabilities at a leadership level to lead to both financial and non-financial gains for Australia. Asian Australians and the Asian diaspora should be empowered and encouraged to foster these important skills and talents, and further contribute their knowledge and experiences to our developing shared culture and increasingly diverse global workplaces. The challenge I pose for the senior leadership within private and public institutions here in Australia is to create a healthy culture within their organisations to support and empower Asian Australians and the Asian diaspora to fully leverage their skills and talents, their networks and their relationships, and also cultivate the careers of high-performing Asian Australian leaders and transition them into senior leadership roles. Considering Asia's importance to our future, there is a greater urgency to enable and elevate Asian Australians to senior leadership roles. A starting point is to address the so-called bamboo ceiling, recognise unconscious bias, and give cultural diversity the same policy priority that gender equality and equity now enjoys, something we at the ANU Centre for Asian Australian Leadership are working tirelessly to enable and elevate. To fully enable, elevate and leverage these capabilities, it will require a coordinated effort by all stakeholders, governments, industry and professional bodies, companies and businesses, and key individuals within them to drive long-term sustainable change. Consistent with the Asia Taskforce final report and the discussion paper I had the privilege of co-authoring, I recommend for the following actions to be undertaken. For the Australian Government, introduce legislation to require non-public sector employers and corporate organisations with 100 or more employees to define, collect, disclose and report data on cultural diversity, which will allow a comprehensive understanding of the ethnic and cultural composition of Australian companies and businesses. For our professional and industry bodies, elevate Asia capabilities by introducing into professional accreditation programs, such as those run by the Australian Institute of Company Directors, which we are currently working with our centre, and professional bodies like CPA Australia and Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand. And also develop industry-based and sector-specific champions of change networks comprising senior leaders who regularly share learnings and experiences on making improvements in cultural diversity. For both the public and private sectors together, develop talent management plans which leverage senior Asian Australians and Asian diaspora members into leadership positions to drive stronger engagement and understanding of Asia. These plans should and could include strategies, timelines, and policies and procedures across all human capital areas, recruitment, retention and promotion. These plans should be aligned with learning and development plans to develop greater Asia capabilities and communication strategies, for example, profiling role models, sharing stories and experiences. Such strategies and policies would include, for recruitment, ensure all recruitment and succession planning processes include a diverse slate of candidates, including culturally diverse candidates for all roles. Retention. Ensure culturally diverse candidates are given equal opportunities for sponsorship and mentoring by senior leaders, and stretch assignments including secondments. Promotion. Monitor effectiveness of pipeline management through data analytics with a cultural diversity lens at business unit levels. Of course, business leaders should monitor progress on enhancing their pipeline of Asian Australians and Asia diaspora members in senior leadership positions, CEOs, C-suites and executive board levels against measurable targets. I mean, this doesn't only refer to businesses. I think universities, media companies, public service agencies could also develop as well within their institutions. To ensure accountability for cultural diversity, they should introduce appropriate measure metrics for business units and more commonly known as targets. And to sustain these changes, companies and businesses should ensure that these plans are embraced by both boards and management to be fully part of corporate cultures and lived values. To further support the rollout of their plans, companies and businesses should introduce external advisory committees, encourage networks which support greater cultural diversity, and cultivate a community of interest in Asia to maintain employee skills and talent databases within workplaces to better recognise, value and utilise these hidden Asia capabilities and Asian literacy skills. For Australia to succeed in a post-COVID world, adjust to the new norm and identify paths to economic recovery, governments, businesses, industries and individuals will need to adapt and think differently, establish new partnerships and diversify our trade in the Asia region. In an increasingly globalised region and world, the most effective image Australia can show is an independent, multicultural Australia, confident of our place in the world and the region, a task all of us and all Australians have a role to play. Australia does have the right resources and talent in the form of Asian Australians and the Asian diaspora in Australia to support our businesses to succeed in Asia and our governments to build better relationships with their Asian counterparts. As mentioned earlier, their immediate advantage is their cultural knowledge, personal networks, mobility experiences, and language skills, hidden superpowers that need to be enhanced. If we are serious in accelerating business engagement with Asia, or diplomatic engagement with Asia, we need to lift the contributions of this cohort well beyond anything that has been achieved before and provide them with the right opportunities to play a meaningful role to give Australian businesses and governments a greater chance of success in Asia. To do this, we must address the bamboo ceiling because its existence is holding back Australia's potential. To break through the bamboo ceiling in all the key institutional areas where it presently exists, in addition to what I recommended in this lecture, much will need to be done at the micro level, company by company, workplace by workplace, institution by institution, and sector by sector. DFAT and the New Colombo Plan is today hosting a webinar on breaking the bamboo ceiling, while the Australia-China Young Professional Initiative, the ACYPI, is hosting an in-conversation as we speak with two prominent Asian Australians on how to advance representation and leadership in Australian politics. This Perspectives Asia lecture is another positive example of this. We need to talk about this, we need to put this on the national agenda, and we need to come up with ways to make the difference. Whilst we have come a long way, there is still a longer road ahead. But in saying that, we are headed in the right direction. I hope I was able to present a compelling case of why we need to enable and elevate Asian Australians to lead Australia to greater success in Asia. If there is one message I want to leave you all with this evening, it is, and I quote, and again, apologies for repeating myself, the richness of Australia is not just in our minerals and resources, but the diversity of our peoples. Thank you. Do you want me to stay here?